Welcome to the course Business Analytics and Text Mining Modeling using Python. So, in last few lectures we have been into the last leg of our covering Python for analytics. So, that is about the last library package that we want to cover, matplotlib. So, few things we have been able to discuss. So, what we will do a recap of what we discussed and then pick up from the last point where we stopped. So, let us start. So, as we discussed that we need to set up Jupyter environment to use matplotlib. So, for that we can run this particular magic command matplotlib space notebook percentage matplotlib space notebook. However, it might not be required in the latest Jupyter environments, but anyway we will run it. So, this is the first thing. Then as the next few lines of code that we require that we are going to execute, we will require these library modules matplotlib.pyplot as plt and numpy as np. So, let us load these two library modules. Now, first thing we will talk about generating a simple plot. So, before that let us generate some data. So, we are going to use a one dimensional array object as an example here. So, let us define this array 1D using np.arange function and 10 values. So, if I run this we will have that particular array. Now, the next thing is creating a plot using plot function. So, this plot function is coming from this matplotlib library plt.plot and then we will pass on this data that we have array 1D. So, typically as you would understand for a 2D plot we need data along x axis and y axis. So, both the coordinates and therefore and that is to be used to generate a plot. So, in case we are passing just one for passing data for just one argument either x or y. So, other one is going to be copied and the same data is going to be used for plotting. So, if I run this plt.plot using array 1D. So, you can have a look at the graph plot that we have generated. You can see the same values have been used and therefore, we have got a line passing through the origin here, and this is how a simple plot can actually be generated using matplotlib functionality. Now, let us move forward. So, the next thing that we discussed under this topic is the figure object. So, most of the plots that we are going to generate they are actually generated in the frame defined by this figure object. So, all these plots are going to be residing in this particular frame that is defined by this figure object. So, how we will talk about figure object and how we can work around this object to generate more number of plots. So, first thing creating a figure object. For this we can use figure function. So, plt.figure, this is also coming from matplotlib library and we can store this object because we would be using it for a few more lines of code. So, fig is equal to plt.figure and if I run this I will get something like this. So, you can see this is a blank thing, you can see figure 2 coming there. So, right now when we just create a figure object we get this blank figure there. Now, if we want to go ahead and generate few plots, we might work upon the number of plots that we might be generating in this figure object. So, if there is just one plot that we want to generate, then we can go ahead with that. Otherwise, we will have to add axes to the figure object if we plan to generate more number of plots. So, how do we do this particular aspect? How do we perform this, execute this? So, for that for adding more number of plots we have this add underscore subplot method. So, this will allow us to add axes to the figure object. So, in this first and second arguments in this particular method they are used to specify the grid. By grid we means number of rows and number of columns that will determine the number of plots that we are going to have in this figure object and the configuration of those plots also. So, if we have 2 rows and 2 columns, so we will have a matrix kind of thing 4 squares 4 subplots that we can create in the fig object, or with the same number of plots we want to go with the same number of plots 4, we can have a different configuration also. We can have 1 row and 4 columns. So, we will have to decide the grid, that means the configuration of rows and columns, the way we would like to plot different we would like to generate different number of plots. So, number of rows and number of columns, the first and second arguments, they can be used to specify the configuration of grid that we would like to use for our plotting. So, it will configure the figure object that we have already defined, that we have already created. So, we will go with this example 2 cross 2 4 plots, and we have another third argument that is to specify the index position in the grid. So, when we specify that index position, that particular plot is going to be selected. So, we can go like index position like 1 2 3 and 4. So, that particular plot in that figure object in that grid is going to be selected for plotting. So, let me start. So, first thing axis, first pair of axes that we would like to generate here. So, when we say pair of axes, it will essentially create a mechanism for a subplot for us. So, axis 1, and we are calling we are using this fig object that we have already created, and we are calling add underscore subplot method. So, fig dot add underscore subplot, first argument 2, that means 2 number of rows, then second argument 2 column number of column, then 1 the index position. So, if I run this, so at this particular index position number 1, the axes are going to be generated. So, if I go back to the figure object, you can see this is the very first top left corner of the figure object, top left corner of the figure object. So, there the index 1 starts from there, and that particular index has been selected to generate these axes. Essentially a subplot, we would be able to add a subplot in this using these particular axes. Similarly, because we have gone for 2 cross 2 thing, so therefore, we can add axes in more number of plots there, subplots there. So, for second subplot we can go ahead and create axes again. So, axis 2 fig dot add underscore subplot 2 comma 2 comma 2. So, in this case we are picking that the second index there. So, if I run this, and you can go back to the figure, and you can see the second index, which is the top right corner of the figure object, that frame, and the there the axes have been added. So, now this is the subplot that can also be used to generate our plots. Similarly, axis 3. So, if I run, so you can see index number 3, which is the bottom left part of the this frame, there axes have been added. Now, this can also be used to generate plot. Now, let us move forward. So, what we will do, we will use these subplots to generate certain graphics. So, by default last subplot is used for plotting. So, last one is the index 3 that we have generated. So, that is going to be used. So, as an example, we are we are taking this we are going to add this data using np.random function 50 observations, and we will be taking cumulative sum of these randomly generated normal this is these because we are using random rand. Therefore, they are being drawn from the random normal distribution. So, these 50 values are going to be drawn from there, and then we will take the sum cumulative sum, and then that is going to be the data that our plot plt.plot function will use to generate the plot. And in the second argument we have specified few things. So, this second argument is actually a string abbreviation to indicate color and line style that is going to be used to generate this plot. So, in this case we are going to be using this dash line. So, dash line is indicated by double dash. So, we can refer help section if we want to understand more about this. So, we can go to help, and you can see we have a matplotlib reference. So, there we can type plot there, and we would be able to find out more details about these configuration. So, if I just type plot there. So, you would see that we will have more detail here. And these details will include the colors and graphics. So, let me find that out in the help section. So, you can see there these are formatted string. You can see B character, B is for blue, G for green, R for red. So, in this fashion, K is for black. So, similarly, other things are also there for different kind of marker. We have this list. Similarly, for line style we have this. So, you can see one dash is solid line style, double dash is dash line style, and then dash dot line style, and then we have colon for dotted line style. So, these different characters are used to generate different kind of line style there. Few examples you can see here, K and cap. So, different kind of black triangle of markers. This double dash is for dash line with the default color, and in this case in our example that we have taken, you can see we have taken K double dash. So, that is for black color and double dash line kind of plotting. So, in this fashion you can specify different parameters to generate your plots. So, data we have in the second argument we have specified the kind of styling features that we want. So, once we have done that, we can go ahead. So, you can refer, this is the plot, this is our figure object. So, if I run the next line of code, we will be generating a plot here. If I go back, so you can see here in the third index, you can see a plot has been generated there. So, we had this random data and cumulative come sum of these random values. This is the kind of plot that you can see in the figure object, the index 3 that has been generated. You can see this is dashed line and black color has been used to generate this plot. So, few of the arguments, few of the features that we are going to discuss and cover under this topic matplotlib. Now, let us take a few more examples. So, using empty subplots, for example, histogram using hist method. So, we still have few other subplots in the fig object that we have created. So, this time we are going to call axis 1. So, in this case you can see that we are referring to the subplot here. So, axis 1, the first the subplot at index 1. So, we are going to use that and we will generate a histogram that using hist method here. So, first argument is we are passing on the data that we would like to plot. So, again 100 values drawn from normal distribution, then bins that we want, number of bins that we want, we have specified, color we have specified, and one more parameter alpha we have specified. So, if I run this, then if I go back, you can see that figure 2, you can see that the plot has been generated here. Now, let us move forward. Now, next example is scatter plot. So, in this we are using the axis 2, the another subplot that we have there, the empty subplot that we still have there at index 2. So, we are going to use a scatter method here. We will be generating a scatter plot. Again, first argument is about data, 30 values that we want, and other details that of course you can refer the matplot section to find out more details about any function. So, if I run this, then in the matplot, in the figure object that we have, the remaining one, you can see this is the scatter plot with blue dots and the marker you can see here. So, this is the scatter plot that has been added. So, in this fashion now you can see how The figure object can be used to generate a number of plot, a kind of matrix, a different kind of grid we can configure, and different number of plots we can generate there. If we do not want, if we are just going with the one plot, then we can simply use the plot function and we will have that. So, in this fashion different kind of plotting and can be generated. We also touched upon a bit on the styling thing, and so that can also be effectively used. Now, let us move forward. Now, we will talk about creating a figure with a grid of subplots, and in this we are going to use a subplot function, and what this particular function is going to return will return an array of subplot objects. So, let me run this here fig1 axes plt dot subplots, and you can see 2 comma 3. So, this is the kind of grid that is going to be returned here. So, if I run this we will have fig1. So, you can see. So, this is another example just to demonstrate the different kind of configuration grid configuration that can be created using the fig object within the fig object frame for our generating subplots. So, you can see we have 2 rows and 3 columns. So, essentially 6 subplots we can generate, and in one go we have been able to generate this layout and also axes as well. So, this is how we can go ahead and define our configuration, grid configuration, and then plot also. So, here once we have this kind of configuration, we can go ahead with the the axis axis object that we have, and we can use the coordinates to the indices to select the particular subplots where we would like to generate our graphics. So, for example, axis 0 comma 1. So, in this fashion we would be able to we can. So, this is like a 2D array, this indexing is like a 2D array. So, 0 comma 1 we will be able to pick up that top left corner plot there, and we can generate this again this scatter plot here. So, if I run this and we go back, so you can see here that 0th row, that means first row, and a column with index 1, that is second column. So, there this particular scatter plot has been generated. So, in this fashion we can use these these functions, these subplots axes of and will be able to generate plots in different subplots in the fig object. Now, let us move forward. So, now we will talk about some of the plotting functionality that is available in the pandas package itself. So, what we will do because we are going to use pandas, we would like to pandas plot functionality which is internally based on some of the many of the features of matplotlib itself. So, to avoid any conflict we will clear the output there, and we will start rerunning of our code from here again. So, first thing we will clear outputs, we will go to cell tab and all output, and we will clear the previous things previous output that we have generated along with the variables and other things, objects and other Python objects and other things that are there. Now, we will talk about some of the pandas built in methods that can be used to create visualizations and graphics, and there we can use the data frame and series objects. So, typically as we have said that we would be dealing with the structured data. So, where you will have the tabular format of data. So, there data frame and series objects, if we can use these objects and directly create plots, that would be more meaningful in the analytics context. So, we will use some of the pandas built in methods for that. So, let us import pandas as PD, and then we will generate a series 1 object as well here. So, here again we are drawing 10 observations, 10 values from normal distribution, cumulative sum, and so in this fashion let me run this code, and we will have the series 1 object. So, you can see, and you can have a look at the indices also. So, the indices are the way we have generated there, you can see that different indices we have generated, Now we can go ahead and create a plot. So, in pandas built-in functionality, we have the plot method. So, for any series or data frame object, we can call this plot method. So, we can call series1 dot plot, and the data and the values that we have, those are going to be plotted here. So, if I run this, you can see again we have a fig kind of object here that has been created and plot has been generated. So, you can see the functionality is essentially built on top of matplotlib library, and you can see the indices, they have been plotted along the x axis. So, that is why we had that kind of particular indices, those values, to clearly display the kind of plot that we are going to generate. So, you can see indices along the x axis and the values that we have, you can have a look at the values in output 16. So, those have been plotted along y axis. You can have a look at the range. So, range starts from minus 0.23 and goes up to 6. So, you can have a look at the plot. The plot is also starting is starting from a value below 0 and then going up to 6, and on x axis as you can see the indices. So, this is how the Python built-in methods that can be used to generate plot here. Now, let us take a data frame example. So, for that we will create this define this data frame object df1. So, we will call pd dot data frame, and again we will draw will create a 2D 2 dimensional this is a 2 dimensional array. So, we will take 10 comma 4. So, we will draw those values there, and we will take cumulative sum there, and sum along all the columns there, and we have these columns A, B, C, D and indexes also. So, let me define this data frame. Let us have a look. So, you can see that we have these 4 columns A, B, C, D, and we have been able to generate indices also. You can have a look 0, 10, 20. So, these are the index values that we have, row index values, and the column names A, B, C, D, and the values they have been drawn from normal distribution. So, you can see these values here. So, we have 4 columns and 10 rows. So, 40 values here in total. This is the data frame object, and you can see also you can have a look at the values also along each along each column. You can see the cumulative sum kind of values are being generated there. So, that is clearly visible from the numbers itself. So, now just like the series object, here also we can use this data frame object df1 and call the plot method here. So, we can call df1 dot plot, and these 4 columns that we have, they are going to be. So, we will have 4 plots using these 4 columns and the same indices. So, we have one index here, row index, that is going to be plotted along x axis, and 4 columns we have which might be representing which could represent any variable. So, those are going to be plotted along the y axis. We will have 4 plots there. So, if I run this, you can see this kind of plotting is typically more useful in the analytics context, that in one go we have been able to generate a number of plots in the same fig object, same subplots. You can see 4 columns A, B, C, D with different color coding, and they have been plotted in this fashion. So, similarly this is the default thing. So, a line a line plotting has been done. We can further use the bar. We can also generate bar plot as well. So, for that we can call this method plot dot bar. So, df1 dot plot dot bar. So, if I call this, we will have this kind of bar plot that has been generated. So, again for 4 different columns A, B, C, D. So, bars have been generated, and for all of these 4 columns for the same indices, you can make comparisons also. So, in this fashion you can see how easy it becomes to generate plots. So, with this we have been able to cover some of the visualization aspects in Python environment. So, we used matplotlib library as well as the pandas built-in methods to generate different plots, and you can see the underlying functionality in Pandas is also built on top of matplotlib. You can see the figure object and many other functionality, but you can see more easy to use in case of Pandas. So, with this we would like to complete our discussion on most of the Python packages. So, in this particular course we have focused a lot on different learning and gaining more expertise and more experience on various Python modules, various Python library packages. That is because in our previous courses we have used R. Now Python is slightly more general purpose programming language. So, slightly more time is required to learn this, so that it could be used effectively with all its power in the analytics context. So, with this slightly comprehensive coverage of Python for analytics, it could be really useful to write code for some of the techniques, some of the analysis that we have done in our previous courses. Now, what we will do, as we discussed in some of the initial lectures of this particular course, we have talked about the text mining modeling, and we covered the introductory part there. We compare the text mining with the data mining modeling. So, that comparison we performed. We talked about different text mining problems that are useful in the analytics, that are typically used to solve different analytics problem coming from different domains. Now, we will take that discussion forward, and now with the additional knowledge and expertise that we have gained in the Python environment, that is going to be really useful for us to understand and learn the text mining modeling aspect. So, now we will start this the next topic, that is transforming unstructured text. So, some of the codes and functionality and libraries that we have learned about string and text processing in Python, that is going to be helpful in this. So, let us start. So, transforming unstructured text. So, as we have talked about that, typically in data mining modeling we deal with the structured text, and we deal with the numbers which are presented in a structured format. We might be required to process a lot more data to create that structure format, but essentially once we have the tabular layout, essentially we are dealing with the numbers there in case of data mining modeling. However, in case of text mining modeling, we start with a number of text files, a number of text documents, and then we process all those text documents, text data in a structured layout, in a tabular layout, so that we can further apply some of the techniques that we have learned in data mining modeling in the text mining context as well. So, essentially text is naturally unstructured data, and we will have to put in a lot of effort to actually convert into a structured tabular form. So, process for this is highly methodical. So, this highly methodical process is required actually so that we are able to learn those steps which are required to process, which are required to transform the unstructured text into a structured form. Some of those things we typically skip in the data mining modeling. However, in this case of text mining modeling, those steps are really important to learn, because it takes a lot of time and expertise to convert some of the unstructured text into a usable form for analytics. So, first step typically in text mining modeling is collection of relevant text documents for a given business problem. So, given your business problem, you will have to collect all the documents that you would be using for a particular text mining modeling problem. So, first thing is to collect all those documents. So, what are some of the common sources of this text data collection? So, typically document warehouses or databases, organizations public or private, they might have their own document warehouses and databases. For example, rules, regulations, guidelines or technical documents. They might have their knowledge systems where they are, and learning system where there might be so many documents which might be lying around. So, some of those documents can actually be used for text mining purposes, text mining modeling purposes. So, those could be sources for data collection and rather easy sources for text data collection. Then we could have the websites, so many websites, they provide web APIs publicly. So, anyone, any researcher, analyst can actually use those web APIs to get data from those popular websites. For example, Twitter, they provide a number of web APIs to actually extract tweets. So, similarly other websites also. Then we have web crawler software programs also, which many people use to crawl through the websites and get the text files that are there and use that to develop their text collection of text documents, which we typically refer as corpus, text corpus. So, these are websites are another sources to collect data. Then there could be log files of servers. So, many servers are typically required to run our day to day business operations. So, logs file, a number of logs files are generated, which keep on recording various operational and task related details in those log files. So, sometimes those log files could be really useful to mine and to actually gain certain insights to help in certain business problems. So, log files could also be sources of text data collection. Corporate documents, government documents as we talked about. So, even if we do not have the data warehouses and databases, still we might be having the documents in our personal computers and mails and other places in hard copy and many other formats. These corporate and government documents could be available in our organization. So, they could also be a source of text data collection. So, this is about different sources of text data collection. Now, we will stop here in this lecture and we will continue our discussion on transforming unstructured text in the next lecture. Thank you.